Hello and welcome to another episode of Seven Story Podcast. I'm Natasha Kyler and I'm here with today's featured author, Audrey Wilson. Audrey Wilson is the published author of Wrong Girl Gone, Only Human, Landing Like Rain, and The Ever End, with her next novel coming out in 2026. Having earned her BA in television writing and producing from Columbia College Chicago, Audrey has written over 24 screenplays and television episodes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like writing is something that I've just loved ever since I was a kid. From writing short stories when I was little to writing screenplays with my good friend. We started making movies together when we were in junior high. It's just always been something that's very innate to me and just something I've been very drawn to. I started writing my the first novel that I ended up getting published when I was in high school, and it was a long journey, a big learning curve, just learning how to write and get a novel published. But that ended up being my debut book. So Wrong Girl Gone. It's started when I was in high school, and now it's a published novel today, which is just very exciting.
And what was that transition like going from writing screenplays and television episodes to a published novel?
That's a good question. So I've kind of always done a little bit of both. Like both of them have really interested me. So I don't feel like I necessarily went from one to the other. But I know like kind of when I get an idea for a story, a lot of times my first thought is this a screenplay idea or is this a novel? And there's kind of different things that make it more suitable for one versus the other. For a novel, obviously you have to have a little bit more substance, kind of more character development, and kind of like this whole world that you can build and create. With a screenplay, you're more limited to about that like 90 to 100 page mark. So it just has to be a lot more succinct. And also, a lot of times with screenwriting versus a book, when you write a book, essentially the word is the finished format versus with a screenplay, you're kind of just creating that draft for somebody else to take on and produce. And so that's another thing that kind of comes into play, especially for someone who is still like newer in the industry. You don't want to create a screenplay that's necessarily going to cost like millions of dollars to make, right? With a book, it kind of doesn't matter. You don't have a budget for set design or for character casting or anything like that. But with a screenplay, you have to kind of keep that in mind. A lot of production companies don't want to take a chance on something that's going to cost them a ton of money right out of the gate. So just kind of different things that I keep in mind when I'm determining if I should write something as a novel or as a screenplay.
So interesting. And you just gave me so many things to start considering because I have ideas and I'm like, I see this in my head as so many different things. I don't know
Yeah,
how I'm going to start writing it. So
that can
definitely dropping gems.
that can definitely be challenging. I have the same exact problem. And one piece of advice that I even give writers, if they haven't maybe written a novel before, is sometimes it's actually easier to kind of start with a screenplay because you can at least get kind of those bare bones of the story down that you want to tell, and then kind of elaborate on it in a novel.
That makes sense. You can build on that world and elaborate on the characters and give more background within the novel because it's a longer body of work.
Exactly. Yeah.
So very interesting. And can you tell us a little bit more about your book, The Ever End?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have a physical copy of it yet, but I do have the bookmark here. You can see the cover, everything. That was designed by Bywater Books, so they're my publisher for The Ever End. And The Ever End is a psychological horror thriller novel. So kind of along the lines of Wrong Girl Gone, in that it's got a lot of twists and turns. Definitely a lot of suspense. But this one goes a little bit darker than that one. It gets a little bit more into the supernatural. There's definitely more horror elements to it. It's essentially about a woman who goes with her fiance to meet his family for the first time at their remote home in Iowa. And once she gets there, she feels instantly very welcomed by them. They're very happy to have her there. But as the week kind of goes on, she starts noticing these very strange things about his family, which starts kind of spinning the story, forward, with a lot of different kind of plot twists and things like that. So just starting as she kind of starts to dig deeper into their past, she starts kind of figuring out like these people aren't who they say they are.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And how did you decide that that was going to be a novel versus a screenplay?
Good question. I would say it's funny because I'm actually currently working on an adaptation of The Ever End and writing it into a screenplay, which it actually has been translating pretty well into that. I would say for that one, I kind of just wanted to have like a finished product. Like I started writing it during the pandemic. There was a lot of chaos going on in the world. I didn't want to necessarily have to depend on producers or a production company to kind of finish creating it. I wanted to have something that I could say I completed. And that I could kind of see through to the end. So that was kind of my logic with that. But I do feel it's one of those stories that because it's kind of limited characters, it's limited settings, it would translate well into a screenplay.
Definitely. I can kind of picture it now. There's a couple of movies that come to mind when you started explaining. I was like, yeah, this could totally be a movie. I'd see it. And I'm not
Awesome.
that big onto psychological thrillers. Like I have to watch them 10 in the morning, sun is bright.
Yeah, like something to hide behind.
Yeah, but I totally watch
Well,
it.
if it helps, some of the reviews I've gotten for it say that it is a good horror book for people who aren't super into horror because it's not extreme horror. It's more kind of psychological suspense.
Exactly what I need. I'm a big crybaby. I scare easily. I jump at everything. It's perfect for me.
Yes.
And what inspired you to write that story?
Whew. I would say honestly, like kind of, I wanted to play with the idea that what is the most stressful and kind of awkward thing that could happen when you're going to meet your in-laws, And I love kind of putting my characters in these difficult situations. And, I love kind of if there's a relationship in the story, kind of testing the boundaries of that relationship, trying to make it crack. And so I really wanted to write a story that kind of dove into that. And this is kind of what started coming out. I kind of thought of this like isolated rural setting. I thought of a character kind of essentially being like trapped in this family where, maybe she's not physically trapped, but because she's there with her fiance, the person she's going to marry, she's very much kind of having to, adjust to the way this family lives and kind of their expectations of her and everything. So she kind of has to fit into that, which I feel like is in a way very like real. Like a lot of us I feel like have been in situations like that where we're more afraid of hurting someone's feelings or being impolite than we are from necessarily like getting out of the situation. um so I just really wanted to kind of play with that.
It's very interesting and I love it. Like you said, it's very real in that I'm just gonna do it because I want to be polite and I don't want
Right.
to hurt anyone, people pleasing tendencies.
Exactly, yeah, it's kind of its own nightmare in itself.
Definitely putting your characters in very, very horrible situations.
Exactly.
And speaking of those characters, um, are any of them like specific to you, very personal to you? How do you come about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that for the title, not title character, but the primary character, the protagonist, Margot, I really wanted her to have kind of this like strength, but also a vulnerability to her. A lot of times that's kind of how I see myself, where I feel like I do tend to be a people pleaser and I tend to agree to things sometimes before I really think it through. And I wanted to make sure that people could relate to that. I think a lot of people kind of feel that way. And with Margot's character in particular, I never wanted audience members to think, oh, she's just being dumb. She's the girl in the horror movie who ran up the stairs instead of out the front door. Like I wanted it to all kind of be psychological. So, kind of this idea that like you're trying so hard to like please your future in-laws or please your partner, and you want to make sure that they're happy, so you're kind of setting aside your own happiness. So I feel like that's something in a way that's personal to me. Like that can be a very personal struggle, and I wanted to make sure that that kind of was conveyed with her character.
Yeah, that's very realistic and very relatable. Like, I hope I make a good impression. I hope they like me. Being in your
Exactly.
head, trying to make sure you're put together, you seem good, and that you make the best impression possible rather than
Exactly.
going, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not liking it.
Right, right, exactly.
Um, and with that, so I know you mentioned in the written interview that you're a big outliner. So can you kind of walk me through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would even say my outlining process and my drafting process has even changed in the last couple of years. What I used to do was essentially just have like a bulleted list of kind of the structure of the story and everything that I wanted to happen. But I felt like that actually got kind of daunting. Kind of just having this one big document with everything that I wanted to have happen. So what I've started doing, and I did this with my last book that my husband and I actually wrote together, what we kind of did was we broke it into chapters, and then we just wrote for each chapter kind of just a couple quick bullet points of what we wanted to have happen. And then from there, we just kind of started building out each chapter. So it felt a lot more tangible, a lot more like we had these kind of set markers that we had to hit rather than just kind of going into it with this huge outline and chunk of information that we had to translate into a book. So I feel like that's actually been really helpful, and it kind of takes some of that stress out of actually like writing the novel because you know like what needs to kind of happen in each chapter.
Absolutely. Like when it looks like a long to-do list, it's like, I don't want to do that.
Exactly.
And when you write, is it a pen to paper process or digital?
Definitely digital for me. My hands would cramp up way too much. So yeah, I usually write in like either Google Docs or Microsoft Word. I tried Scrivener for a little bit, and I can see why it might be helpful for some writers. I couldn't quite get into it, but it actually did kind of give me the idea of like how to structure a book because Scrivener is very much like structured by chapter. So I kind of thought, okay, maybe I'll try doing that for in a Microsoft document. And sure enough, it worked really well. So that can also be a helpful tool if people are looking to figure out like how to structure a book.
Shifting into your experience as a writer, what is your favorite thing about writing?
I would say I would say there's two things. One, when you kind of figure out a solution to a plot problem that you have and everything just kind of clicks into place, like it's the best feeling because we've all been there with writer's block. We all have been struggling before to try to like get past a certain point in the plot. So when you kind of find a solution that then like solves these problems, it's the best feeling. And then the other part I would also say is, well, I have two other ones. The other one is when you just kind of like get immersed in the story, it's just like you kind of lose yourself in it and it just flows. And that's also a great feeling. And then the last part I would say is just when the book gets published and you're holding the copy of the book in your hands. And it just really is this satisfying feeling to see it kind of from start to finish. Because I think so much of the time for us writers is we're just so kind of like in our Word document or in our head that we're not getting to kind of pull back and see the final product. And so when you get to hold the book in your hand, that's kind of that nice, like final moment to show all your hard work.
1,000%. I agree with everything you said. I love getting immersed into whatever I'm creating at that moment. And I was actually just having a conversation with another writer yesterday, who's bridging poetry and comic books for his next project.
Oh,
And
nice.
he's like, I can't wait until it's like finally done and I get to step back. And I'm like, it's gonna be worth it. Like you're gonna have a great turnout. It's gonna be worth it.
Yes, it's totally worth it. That's kind of the cherry on top with getting your work out there.
Yes. Getting it in your hands is like, yes, amazing. And then getting other people to be like, I loved this. This was great. Can you sign it?
Exactly.
Cherry on
Exactly.
whipped cream and cherry.
Absolutely.
um, you mentioned you wrote a book with your husband, and I'm very curious about that too. Do you mind
Yeah.
talking?
So that's kind of my latest project. We're actually in the process of editing it right now. But we got through a first draft, which is pretty cool. We've written screenplays together in the past. And we were kind of like, should we try writing a novel? Like he had this idea and I started like kind of adding to it. And we just kind of started spitballing until we had this like full concept for a novel. And so we decided like, okay, let's give it a shot. We've done screenplays, so let's see how this works. And to be honest, in a way, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. Like I already knew we worked pretty well together in terms of like our creativity and our like kind of storytelling. But it was just interesting because one, like he'd never written a novel before. So it was kind of interesting to like teach him, but also watch him just like go with it. And, it's just kind of a really cool process to be able to have like created something with your partner, and, even looking back on it now, it's like, I think we wrote the first draft in 6 months or so, which is, fairly quick in terms of, at least my track record for how long it takes me to write books. And it's also just kind of a fun thing to like have another person to just like share those ideas with you. So many times like I get stuck in my own head with a story. And with this way we wrote, I was able to kind of say like, oh, I'm stuck with this. And he'd say, well, what if we did this? And even if we didn't end up using that idea, it like spurred other ideas. So it was just really fun to kind of have that like other person who's in it with you, like really in the trenches.
That's so cute. I love that. You like lit up when you started talking about it too.
Really?
Yeah, that was so adorable. I love that.
That's awesome. Well, that's how I feel about it. It's really fun. I'm excited to kind of like get down and like finish editing it because I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Yay. I'm interested too. I'm about to be your biggest fan.
Awesome.
um I want to ask you my other favorite question, which is what's the most unhinged thing you ever put in a novel or screenplay? You write a lot.
Ooh, that's also a good question. I feel like as a whole, the most unhinged thing I put in a novel is probably just the ever end in general, just some of the scenes that I have in that one. Um, I don't want to mention any like too specific because I don't want to give away any spoilers before the book comes out. But let me think. Gosh, I don't know. I don't know how to give it away without giving it away. Let's
That's
just
okay.
say for the ever end, I had to do some research on, and, never look at my search history because I'll find out for sure. But I had to do some research on kind of different rituals because that's very much something that keeps coming up throughout the ever end. The family that Margot is marrying into kind of has these cult-like tendencies and they're obsessed with this televangelist. And so I kind of had to dig into like religious rituals and like strange rituals that people have done over the years when it comes to like marriage and things like that. And one of the most strange things that I found, I took and modified and put in the book. So one of the strangest like rituals that has to happen is loosely based on like a real ritual that some cultures have done. So we will see how that goes over with people.
I'm intrigued. I'm thinking about some of the psychological thrillers that I've seen that
Yeah,
have interesting cult-like rituals in them, and I'm like, yeah, can't wait for the adaptation of this.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think people will be a little like, "Oh, is Audrey okay? Does she need help?" But just yeah, disclaimer, not how I feel about things. It's just for good storytelling. So
Is any writer okay?
I don't think so. I think there's a reason, like, all this stuff kind of is going on in our heads. We have to like get it down on paper.
Yeah, and our search engines are full of things that would get us locked up.
Exactly.
It's all research, we promise.
Right, right.
Promise. We have to make sure it makes sense, you know?
Yes.
Details are supposed to be accurate. We're not actually committing crimes, we promise.
Exactly, exactly. If I search how to hide a dead body, I promise I'm not actually looking for a way to hide a dead body for my own
I'm
life. It's
I'm not
just
murdering people. There are no
nope.
dead bodies in my house, I promise.
Exactly.
I don't wanna know how to clean up blood. I'm just putting it in the book.
Yep,
It's just going in the book. I'm not the
exactly.
first. I won't be the last.
So true.
Um, I kinda asked you all of my regular questions, so now it's just gonna be a regular conversation.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about specifically?
Oh gosh, not that I can think of. I mean, I guess I would just say kind of my general advice that I give to writers, who might be struggling with writer's block or unsure about like where to start with writing a book. I would just say just go for it. I think that like the biggest problem with a writer's brain is that we think we can't do this, or we think like, well, what's the point? There's a million published books out there. But that's the thing, like, there's a million published books out there, and people had to write those, and they got picked up, they got published. And, some are fantastic, some are not so great. So like, don't don't doubt yourself, just push through, write it out. You can always go back and edit later.
And I wanna hear, how do you combat writer's block?
That's a good question. So one of the things that I try to do is tell myself it's okay to write a bad sentence or a bad paragraph or a bad chapter. Like sometimes, yeah, sometimes I'm just going to
Mhm.
have to write something that's not good in order to get through to the parts that are good. I can always go back and fix it later. Another thing that I try to do is when I'm having a writing session, I try not to ever stop when I'm feeling stuck. I try to push through that to get to a point where I know the next time I sit down, I'm going to be excited to pick this back up. Because if
Mm.
you stop at a point where you're like, "Ooh, I'm feeling really stuck. I'm going to stop and set it aside." Chances are you're going to have a harder time coming back to it. Whereas if you stop on a scene that you're really excited to write, you're going to want to get back into that and you're going to want to write it.
Gems upon gems. Not every sentence you write has to be your magnum opus.
Exactly, exactly. Just put it on paper. I've written plenty of bad sentences.
Plenty. And I will write plenty more.
Exactly.
It is just part of the process.
It is. Yep.
Um, and you read a bunch of different genres, including romance. Have you ever written any romance?
Yes, I actually have. So, one, I've written a poetry collection. So that's all kind of centered around like love poems, relationships, things like that. And then I also wrote a romance novel called Only Human. It's an LGBTQ romance about these two women. And it was a story that was just very personal to me, just very compelling. And that was published last year by Flashpoint Publications. And then I actually have another YA romance that's coming out next year from Bywater Books, the same publisher that is publishing The Ever End. So those are pretty much the two genres that I like to write in, either thriller/horror or romance.
That's lovely. You publish a lot. You write a lot. I'm inspired.
Well, good, good. I'm glad. I feel like in a way it's funny because I don't feel like I write as much as it sounds like I'm writing, but like some of these books I've kind of written over the years and now they're just now getting like published and out there. So sometimes, when it rains, it pours.
You have a catalog. Your library of books, yes, it's long.
It's building, that's for
It's
sure.
absolutely. Um, trying to think if there was anything else that I was intrigued by in your written interview. Um, you mentioned you talked about your husband and you have a family. So how do you find the time to write? That's my last question for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I feel like I'm very fortunate in that my 9 to 5 job is remote. So, kind of after 5, 6 p.m., I don't have that long commute home. I'm able to kind of set my day job aside and get to work with some writing. And then I also do some writing on the weekends. I don't have a set schedule just because it kind of depends on what else I have going on at that time. Like sometimes I'm writing or editing, but other times I'm preparing a newsletter for the month, or doing some marketing for an upcoming book that's coming out, or scheduling like book tours. So, even if I'm not necessarily writing, I feel like I'm still doing little things directed towards my writing every day. So even if it's, social media, marketing, what have you, I still try to like carve out a little bit of time every day to do something related to my writing.
That's very important because those admin tasks stack up.
Yep.
Marketing is not everyone's favorite.
It's not my favorite, I can tell you that. I would much rather just be working on my novel.
Yeah, I feel you. And I work in marketing.
Well, there you go. Then you really know.
Yeah. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to take this time to give you. My dog is throwing a tantrum. I want to take this time to give you the floor and talk about where and when The Ever End will be released, and anything else you want to promote, your socials, all of that.
Awesome. Yeah. So The Ever End comes out August 5th of this year. So just around the corner. It'll be available wherever books are sold. It's currently available for pre-order. So you can get your copy on bywaterbooks.com. You can get it on Amazon, or you can order it directly through me. I would gladly send a signed copy. So for that, you can go to my website, which is audreywilsonauthor.com. You can also follow me on social media. I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook at Audrey Wilson Author. And yeah, please feel free to follow me. You can also check out my Goodreads page. And yeah, I can't wait to hear what all of you think of The Ever End. I'm really excited.
Lovely. Well, that's it for this episode of Seven Story Podcast. Thank you so much, Audrey, for joining us and sharing your story. Make sure you check out The Ever End when it is released. It is available for pre-order, like she mentioned. Visit her website, audreywilsonauthor.com, to check out all of her books because, like she mentioned, she writes in different genres. And until next time, I'm Natasha from Seven Story Podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha.